Hello, everyone. Good morning. It is Monday morning again at 8 a.m. This is the Community Unlocked podcast. I am your host, Jamie Langscove, and this is my co-host, Laura Holmes.
Hello.
And we're gonna sync up because you're gonna do your own and also Laura Holmes. I feel like that's maybe what we should.
You always
I know we talked about
do
that last time.
such a lovely job, so it's all good.
Well, I am so excited to jump into our topic today because we are talking about my favorite nerd topic other than gaming, which was also super fun.
That was very fun.
But we're going to jump into data management today, which, some people might not be excited about, but I am super excited about. So we're going to make
I'm excited too. I don't know a ton about it. I feel like I come to the podcast a lot of the time being like, I don't know, like Dungeons and Dragons, I never played. Like, what is this? But I guess, I'm very curious. I like learning new things. So I'm excited to jump into. And I do understand the importance of data. I mean, I've worked in tech for a long time, so I'm not like totally in left field here, but professional.
Yeah, well, and I think actually firstly, I love that you bring curiosity to the show. I think that helps other people feel like it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to jump in and be like, you know what, I don't actually know that much about this. And that's great. But I also think that because you come from a different part of tech and a different functional area, I think it's really good actually to have our different opinions here and our different perspectives here, because then you can say, well, wait a minute, this might make sense to the two of you, but I need you to connect to the other parts of the business better for me. And I think that's the whole point of the show, right?
Yeah.
So I think this works really well. I don't know. You guys in the audience tell us if you're liking the show format so far, but I think I've gotten really positive feedback and I'm having a good time. So
likewise. And I remember when you first kind of talked to me about this, your whole idea of community is everything, right? It's not this uniquely distinct, specific thing that operates in isolation. It touches and connects to everything. And that's what I've really enjoyed, because we've had so many different types of guests, and we're talking about data today, which might not initially connect dots directly to community. But to your point, in the inception of all of this, it's all related. It's all connected. My viewpoint ultimately comes back to your viewpoint, comes back to community. And I think that's really wonderful. So, from my perspective, while I might be a bit biased because I sit here and get to chat with you every week, I really think you're doing what you set out to do when you created this. So I love it. And I appreciate you letting me be here and ask silly questions and, be curious with you.
I love you being here. It makes it less awkward than me sitting here and monologuing at myself. So
I mean, that would be, it might be a bit awkward. I'm not going to lie. So you're welcome.
Yeah.
Not that you couldn't do a lovely job at it. But how are you? Real quick.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
I am good. I'm fighting a cold. The kids brought a cold home. So
the Petri dishes, we talked about them.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So I was really hoping that we were going to get a pass on that, but no, here we are. And I know Sheeri's got a little one too. So when we bring her on, I'm sure that she has some horror stories as well about all the little germies that they bring home. But I'm doing okay. And I wanted to talk a little bit about Thanksgiving today before we jump into data. So firstly, tell me, how was your Thanksgiving break?
It was lovely. It was pretty low key. That's kind of how I like to do holidays.
Same.
I think with, getting older or just perspective, for me, it's important to try to not add to what's already can be a really stressful time of the year. So love my family and my husband's family and all the family, but it's kind of nice to just see them other times or not feel like we have to force ourselves to make a big trip or something like that, which I know is not for everyone, but for me that works. That protects kind of my, I think, headspace this time of the year. And so we just did a really low key, my husband, my kiddos, and my kids don't like traditional Thanksgiving food. So we're like, what can we do differently? So their plate is not just like a roll. I mean, they won't even eat mashed potatoes. It boggles my mind. I'm like, you love this food in all forms, but you won't eat it mashed full of butter and salt. What's going on? So we were really like, what are we gonna do? Well, my husband is like half Filipino, and they love chicken adobo. It's something a dish we introduced them to. So we're like, why don't we
Okay.
just like, I mean, my husband and I don't really love the turkey stuff anyway. So we did like chicken adobo and a more kind of Filipino inspired meal, and they loved it. So that felt like a win
That's
in our
amazing. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I mean, I have to say, firstly, I love that for you. I love that you're choosing that because it's something that a few years ago, I finally also decided, you know what? This is not fun.
It's not, right?
This whole pack everybody in the car or on an airplane and travel and get there and hi, yeah, okay, hi. Oh crap, we got to spend all day cooking. Oh yeah, wasn't that fun? Oh God, let's get up and go shopping. Oh no, we're gonna run around. Oh, now it's time to go home again. Like, and then you come back and you're not rested at all. And you're like,
Yeah.
I need a vacation from my vacation.
It's a lot. It can be a lot. I know a lot of people do that and love it, but I just think, if your experience is one of stress, like for me, it's like, well, why don't we see you the weekend after or a couple
Yeah.
weekends from now? Right? Like
It
you
takes
can
the
still
pressure
have,
off too, right? To
yes.
have
Oh my
like a
goodness.
proper whatever celebration,
Yeah.
right? My kids are the same way with the food. They are not a fan of typical Thanksgiving food.
Yeah.
And so we ended up making one of our chickens. So for those who don't know, we raised
Mhm.
chickens for eggs and for meat. And yeah, I just roasted one and we did do some of the traditional stuff. We did like mashed potatoes. I tried making a sweet potato casserole for the first time, and that was actually my favorite thing.
Okay. I thought you were going to go a different direction with
Oh,
that
no,
just based on
no.
how you were walking there. I was like, oh, it didn't
But
turn
the
out.
5-year-old and the 13-year-old would not even try it. The
Mm.
5-year-old was like, "It looks like poop." And I was like, "No, that's like the crunchy walnutty topping, and that's the
That's
good
the best
part.
part.
That's the part with all the sugar on it. Like, what is wrong with you?" She's like, "I don't want it."
Yeah.
Okay. This
More
is
for you,
this is fine. Yeah.
right? Oh
Yeah,
my gosh.
exactly. So, yeah, it was a thing.
Mhm.
And I think that the 2 of them pretty much ate mashed potatoes.
Okay, so at least they're eating like one of the best, in my
Yeah.
opinion, things on the table, but
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, the
And
beige
now
foods.
actually
Yeah.
the 13-year-old made the mashed potatoes this year, so that was a new thing. She actually, like,
Oh,
helped prepare, and I
that's
was like, "That's
nice.
really fun because that was something I did with my mom and my grandma growing up, and not to, reinforce the gender stereotypes here, but I have 3 girls in my house. So, I mean, it's me, the 3 of them, and my husband who literally went off to take a nap for most of Thanksgiving.
Jeez.
So yeah, it was a thing, but yeah, we had a very restful weekend. We did not do the whole Black Friday chaos. We did not do any of that, and we just like I gave the girls haircuts yesterday. That was that
Nice.
was the big effort of the weekend.
Hey, that's a good effort. That's
Yeah, yeah, it was
yeah.
it was a good time.
That sounds lovely.
It was, and like I said, I want to also acknowledge that like Thanksgiving as a tradition is problematic for a lot of historical reasons,
Oh, sure.
um, and so I wanted to share. Last month we had Indigenous Peoples Day, which has replaced Columbus Day,
Mhm.
thankfully. But I'm also learning as I get older all of the things that I have to unlearn of what we were taught growing up, and like how many of those things are still being taught in schools.
Yeah.
And so for this Thanksgiving, I was doing some reading and just kind of digging into some of the testimonials and the reflections that Indigenous people have done on the historical impact of Thanksgiving and colonialism and all of that in the US. And so I don't want to go too far down this tangent, but I just wanted to say that I did find a really neat couple of articles that I want to share, and I will drop
Mm.
them in the show notes afterwards. But one of them was highlighting some of the really strong contributors to the tech industry who come from Indigenous tribes. And so I'll share that article because I think it's important to
Cool.
refocus the spotlight, right? Like let's take this time then to elevate the people who have been impacted by this this history that we have in this country that we often don't want to talk about. Mm-hmm. So and the other cool part is that the article is actually on a website that I would love to share as well. It's the People of Color in Tech website. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be Pocket or Possit, but it's POCIT. And I will drop the link to that in the show notes as well. But I would love for you all to take a look at that and kind of get educated and
love that.
Recognize our fellow tech folks who are from those communities. So,
no, I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, because it is, a holiday, I think, as a lot of us are learning and unlearning a lot of things, it's important to acknowledge. So thank you.
Yeah. Okay, well, without further ado, let's go ahead and bring Sheeri on, and we'll go ahead and jump in. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. How's my sound?
You sound amazing. You sound lovely.
Great.
So we are super excited to have you. I am so grateful that you agreed to come on the show and nerd out about data with us. So first and foremost, I would love for you to introduce yourself to the audience. Tell us, about Collibra and what you're doing there and, quick snippet. And then we'll kind of dig into some of the topics that we have pre-selected, but I would love for the audience to also drop questions in the comments.
Great. My name is Sheeri Cabral, and in a former life, I spent about 18 years as a system administrator and then a database administrator. And then, no lie, after the birth of my son, I went back to work, a couple months afterwards, and I realized that being on call was more exhausting than having a newborn. And if you've ever been, if you ever feel like saying that, then stop doing the thing that is more exhausting than having a newborn. So I pivoted to be a product manager for databases and data products. Collibra is a data governance company, and we can talk later about what data governance is. It's super fun at parties to try to explain to people. Actually, my soundbite is that it's basically how you know whether or not you can trust your data, which is a great soundbite. And Collibra makes software to help large organizations track their data.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for that intro. And I mean, starting with what is data governance is a great place to start. So we did some prep for this show. Now, full transparency to everybody. Typically, these shows are very ad hoc because I want us to just have very natural, organic conversations. But Sheeri and I knew that this was going to be potentially so huge that we would end up down some crazy rabbit hole, or we wouldn't even know where to start. So we did do some prep for the show. And so I would say that having a couple of key terms maybe defined for folks would be very helpful. So you mentioned that data governance is about how well can you trust your data. And I think for community people, and marketing folks can probably relate to this as well, that if you are trying to develop any sort of a automation or get any sort of intelligence out of your data about your users, being able to trust that data is a big question mark, right? Especially if you are using that to actually go out and communicate with a user. You don't want to make an assumption about something that they're doing or what their needs are based on bad data. So I guess the first thing I would ask is, are there best practices? This is probably a huge question, but are there best practices that people should be using as they are managing, let's say a set of user data for maintenance or for, making sure that those things are trustworthy?
Yeah,
I'm that big question.
Yeah, no, I actually want to preface this because I was thinking about this, and this is not something that we had talked about beforehand, that a lot of these things, a lot of these topics or ideas that we're going to talk about, for me anyway, apply not just to data in your database, but any data that you collect. So for example, you go to, a meetup because I'm old, so I go to meetups or gatherings or whatever. And there's a sign up sheet, right? That's a data collection point, right? So it starts with collecting data. So what data you collect and how do you collect it? And when I say things like, trust your data, I don't mean like trust that I, wrote down where I live and you can trust that. I mean, like maybe I have 2 accounts because my primary key is email address. So I have 2 email addresses, one work and one personal, right? And I want to make sure that I have that kind of connection. You can't trust that that's actually 2 different people, right? And so trusting is a big, it's a wide range of not just like, oh, this data might be old and stale, so maybe I can't trust it. It's also things like, how are we gathering the data? What are we gathering? I actually start with data. Forget maintenance. Like, let's start with collecting it, because data, think of data as like a puppy. If you collect it, then you own it. You have to like potty train it, whatever. I don't know. I've never had a puppy, so I'm more of a cat person, so don't hold that against me. But when you're collecting, if you have an online forum, do you need the person's last name? Maybe you want to send them emails. So like the first name is a nice greeting to have. Hi, Sheeri, but do you need to collect my last name? Right? Most people just first name, last name. Why not? Not everyone has a last name. Not everyone has one last name. Some people have 4 middle names, right? Like these are things that, are just kind of like, but why do you need that? If you are a community member and you have, a mailing list or you have an event sign up, is marketing going to call you up and say, hey, can I have that list? And then what are you going to say?
No.
No, right. You're going to say no. Right. But if you don't collect it, you can't give it to anyone. Right.
I adore that. And I'm definitely a collect as little as possible because I'm traumatized by implementing GDPR, that we should not collect anything we don't absolutely need ever.
Right. Like you don't, I trust you. You do not need my phone number. I don't care who you are. But unless we are related somehow, you probably don't need my phone number. I assure you, I probably will not answer your call. I might listen to the voicemail. Okay, you could text me maybe, but you probably really don't need my phone number. If we're hosting an event together, get my phone number. Please call me if I'm 5 minutes late to whatever it is. Definitely. But, if I'm signing up for an online forum, do you need my phone number? You don't.
Yeah, I am in the, so you touched on so many points there. Like I am firmly in the camp of ask for data if and when you need it, and only then, and only keep it as long as you need it, and then be done with it. Because it's like even setting up my own website and like pay links and stuff like that for online offerings. Do I want to store your credit card so you can use it later? Hell no. You can enter that shit yourself later.
Do I want to be liable if there's, some fraud that happens on your credit card and I get investigated whether or not there was a leak from any system that I am a part of? Like, no. If you don't have the credit card information, you can't accidentally have a data breach on credit card information.
Exactly. And then you mentioned marketing. Like when marketing comes in and says, hey, can we have that data? It goes the other way too. There are times where I have to say, marketing, you don't need to collect this stuff. Why does your onboarding form have 35 fields? Why?
Right.
What are you doing with that?
And maybe
moreover, how are you maintaining it?
Yeah, gradually as you need it. Like, oh, well, we want to know the demographics or whatever. Well, great. I live in Boston, but how does that help here? Maybe if you have an event coming to Boston, like just send out an email that says, hey, what events are you interested in? If you're interested in live, maybe I'm not interested in live events at all. Maybe I'm shy. You could tell I'm shy, quiet, and introverted. Maybe I don't like to go out and meet other people. And I just kind of like, maybe I just have one question that I want to ask and be done with it. And it's very transactional. You know what I mean? There's community members that are like that. Or maybe I want to join, but don't throw me into the water right away and be like, give me 20,000 things to do. I just want to dunk my feet in the water.
I love that. And I've been dealing with that as well. And Laura, you can probably relate to this too with onboarding, where people have a tendency to just want to give you all the things all at once. And it's like, hold on, I can only process so much at once. And you've now told me my end-to-end lifelong journey with this community. I actually started doing a breakdown on the Atlassian community recently because I got an email like this from them when I joined. And it was like, here is the entire life cycle of what your whole journey with us could look like. And I'm like, cool, I am super not ready for any of that. But thank you for giving me that picture. But I think also to your point, let people opt into these things, right? Like if I want live events, tell me where I can sign up for live events or where I can subscribe to get that information. But you don't have to make that decision for me by collecting my data, right? Yeah. And I think that it also brings me to like email marketing. When you have, and this is something I've also had a lot of re-education to do with a lot of marketing folks, is I want you to have separate subscription lists for all the different things. And I know that's annoying, but also if they unsubscribe from marketing, I don't want them to unsubscribe from community. If they want to unsubscribe from events, I don't want them to unsubscribe from their forum updates. Like we need to have a lot more ability for people to make those distinctions on their own without, and I know it's like a matter of convenience, but
right. Also, when you come to the like onboarding experience, right, you might be new, you might not be new, right? It can be very overwhelming. And, everyone likes to talk about frictionless onboarding and make that on-ramp easy. Don't like, I don't know, throw a bunch of traffic at me and I have to like zip through lanes or whatever. Just like make it a nice, clear, empty road. Be like, okay, you came through here. You want to sign up here. Let me get only the information I need from here. And it goes the other way. Maybe there are people who are like, I'm not interested in all these forums and all these emails. I just want to sign up for this event near me. And I care about the marketing stuff. I don't care about, I don't want to join a community. I just want to go to an event. It kind of goes both ways, right? Give people what they want. I used to actually, it's funny because, I talked about, I was a database administrator, but I have done community organizing for like a long time, and nothing huge or whatever, but, local fiber guild, right? And, every time we would send out an email, which was maybe once a week, we'd get like an unsubscribe and somebody would be like, why are they unsubscribing? And I'm like, well, we're not sending out a lot of emails, and we actually we went back like 6 months, which, again, that's what, 25 people unsubscribing. And we're like, these people came to one event, right? And we got their name from the Eventbrite that we did. We put them on our mailing list. And the event was free. It was like free. It was Ignite Talks, free 5-minute Ignite Talks for about, fiber or any kind of crafty things. And it was a pretty cool event. And they never showed up to any other meeting. I'm like, we didn't really lose a community member. They weren't part of our community, right? They weren't even a member paying dues or whatever. Like they came to an event and we had the audacity, right, to put them on our list. And, some people liked it and came to the meetings. And some people were like, you know what? This is the week I unsubscribe.
So I had a question hearing you all talk about this, and you guys seem aligned in your thinking of kind of minimal data, right? And low barrier of entry, frictionless. How do you talk through this with others who maybe come from a different school of thought, right? Because it's easy to kind of suggest these things when you're talking to someone who feels similarly. But to your point, you mentioned marketing or maybe other teams or stakeholders who might have a different thought process. Like we need all the information because who knows what we might need, or, they feel very strongly about a particular data point. So how do you navigate those conversations with someone who doesn't feel this way, or maybe who doesn't have as deep of an understanding of the impacts of collecting all of this data? Like, what do those conversations look like? I'm just curious.
I mean, I think I started, I've done, community stuff long enough that I don't tend to collect data without telling people what it will and won't be used for. Right. So, and I've been at other people's organized events where I'm like, okay, this sign up sheet, are you giving this to marketing? And they're like, no, we just want to know how many people were at the event. I was like, can I write Jane Doe? They're like, that's fine. Like, they don't need to know that kind of thing. And so I'll say, I'm not giving this list to marketing, or I will use this and I will put you on, the community sign up lists that you'll get emails from this, and be very clear with them. And that way, when a different department comes to me, sales wants it for leads or whatever, I say, oh, I'm sorry, I already promised them. right? That this is what I would use their data for. So I actually can't give you that list. Maybe next time I'll take off that disclaimer on the sign-up sheet, right? And for me, it's just like you said, they don't understand the impacts. And of course, their impacts are bigger. You talk about sales. If your company doesn't have sales, you don't have a company, right? Like I don't have a job if my company doesn't have sales, right? And so they also have an impact, right? And if marketing can't do their thing, then we don't get more people interested or hear about, what we're offering, right? So there are big impacts, and it's always a, security, privacy trade-off with things like making sure the business stays afloat. A lot of these things, if you do have numbers, that helps. Like, oh, X% of the people don't ever come to another event, right? Or don't do that. We don't want a bad reputation for being like, I came to an event or I signed up for your forums and now I'm getting 50,000 emails. And honestly, things like security, privacy, GDPR, which is General Data Privacy Regulation, Protection Regulation in Europe, and CCPR in California, all of these protections. And if, there's HIPAA for health information and FERPA for school, stuff, there's a lot there. And so there's, you can spread fear in a good way, right? To say like, hey, let's not even fear, just like a common sense, like, yes, you want these emails, what if and you can give them ideas like, how about you put them on the list for like 6 weeks and then take them off, like do a temporary thing. And that way they'll get it if they're interested, and then they won't if they don't.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I was just curious because I mean, like you mentioned sales, like sales is going to have a really different lens. They're thinking about data, right? They usually want all the information, or marketing, or, different stakeholders within an organization. And so just, I appreciate hearing how you navigate that and the transparency you provide to those who are disclosing their information, if it is, like an event or something like that. So thank you.
Yeah. Like I assume you're a coaching consultant. So I assume that like, if I come to a webinar or something, you might put me on your list if I had to like put my email into it. And I'm okay with that. Like I consciously think like, do I want to be, we are all, if anybody is buying gifts in this gift giving season, we have all these like names. Today is Cyber Monday, tomorrow is Giving Tuesday. And like, I call Thursday is Take Me Off Your List Thursday.
That's good.
I cannot tell you how many people, I'm like, I didn't even get my order yet. I don't want a sale right now. Let me at least get the item I ordered, see if I like it, and then give me another coupon. Like, when you're shipping it. I mean, maybe the marketing department doesn't know when inventory is, in the warehouse, whatever. I get it. But it was 3 days ago that I ordered it, and, it's not happening, right? Like, so just, just because I ordered something once doesn't mean I want 1,000 coupons.
Yes.
I think it's totally valid too that you mentioned, maybe marketing doesn't know as far as the warehouse and fulfillment and all that, but like, why not? They should know, right? They should be able to create a connection there that says, let's create a trigger when your item has actually been delivered. Then maybe a few days later you can
get some data. What's the average? You have my address if you're delivering something. What's the average amount of time it takes to get, right? Have your marketing, have your warehouse or your, logistics team get some data. Average is 4 days. So then give me something on the 5th day.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you had some really interesting use cases that you had shared with me as far as what people have used Collibra for. And the one that really, the few that really jumped out at me, one was onboarding. So I'd love to dig into that some more, but there was a couple other ones as well, like verifying migrations. So one of the things that I really enjoy doing is platform migrations. And I know that's like the bane of a lot of people's existence in this industry, but
I was like, did I just hear that right? You said you enjoy
doing it.
I really like doing platform migrations because I'm a change management person. So like it gives me a project to work on, right? So, I mean, that's a good one. Compliance. So making sure that data stays private. And so all these things. So I'd love to dig into any of these that you feel excited to talk about first, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so Collibra is a data governance like suite of tools or platform. I don't know the official word for it, but the product that I work on, that I'm a product manager for, is data lineage, which is specifically tracking data as it goes from one place to another. So maybe it comes in a sales transaction, you get the data, and then it goes into the data warehouse. Then marketing runs some reports, right? And so you kind of start usually with databases, end up with some maybe some ETL tools. So I specifically data lineage for ETL tools, which is extract, transform, and load. So how do you change it? How do you aggregate it to get those reports that the average time to delivery to Boston is 4 days? And how do you get like the average amount of time it takes for somebody from when they buy your product to when they're like using it every day is 4 weeks or something? Those kinds of reports, right? And so how does the data get all the way down the line, right? So one of the biggest uses is usually, besides compliance, right, which is, can you show me, like on a graph, I can see my data's here, then it goes here, then it goes here. Can you show me that my private data, somebody's email address, for example, never gets anywhere outside of the private systems, right? And if you have that lineage, it goes from this system to this system to this system, you can see that and you can prove it with a picture, as much as a picture is proof, right, that it's not going anywhere it shouldn't be going. So with migration verification, you can say, hey, we were doing all of this transformation stuff in our old system. What are we doing in our new system? Now you have like 2 pictures, or you can export the data, and see if they're different. So you can basically say, hey, we had 10 pipelines in our old system. Do we have those 10 in our new one? And of course, you're always ever growing. So you probably have 20 at this point. But you can at least verify that. Expedited onboarding was a very interesting use case. And it was not something that I had come up with, or even when I started doing data lineage, that it was, it's not one of the ones that's usually mentioned, like compliances. And that is just, I was asking, as a product manager, I was like, how are you finding the product? How do you like it? And they're like, it's great for onboarding. And I'm like, what do you mean? And they said, well, you can get a sense of, it's like an architecture diagram, right? You can get a sense of where that data is flowing. So somebody in marketing can understand, where do we get this data from this report, right? And so there's a fancy word for where did this data come from. It's called data provenance. Usually that kind of takes the form of, some VP looking at 2 sales reports and like, why are the numbers different, right? And like, then after 3 weeks of calling around, you realize, this report that shows more, that had our test data in it, right? And with, with our tool, and, probably with many others, you can see, like, you can log in and not have to call anyone, not have 17 weeks of meetings to see, like, oh, I see where it's coming from. It's going through here, and the transformation it's, going through is it's removing test data. Great. Now I know I can trust that data. I don't want to trust the sales with the test data, because that's not actual, real income for the company. So that was kind of one of the things where they could show both technical and non-technical people kind of the lineage and how it's coming, to have people have a better sense of where their data is coming from, and why this report is a good report to look at.
I think that is spectacular. And it's one of the reasons that I wanted to have this conversation, because I think a lot of community folks tend to shy away from getting too deep into the data, or they tend to only fixate on what data is easily accessible to them. And so they're like, well, I mean, it's the best we have. Well, why? Why is it the best we have? And also, because I know that you have data elsewhere in this company. I know that you're getting it elsewhere. But also, like you mentioned, being able to communicate that to an executive and say, and feel confident and say, this is what this means, this is why it's like this, as opposed to getting caught sort of, as they say, with your pants down, like, I don't know, that is weird. I guess I should look into that, and then run back to your desk and have a tiny panic attack, right?
Like, you did say a word I want to challenge, which is why it's like that. Data doesn't usually tell you why. And I think that we often make a lot of assumptions about the whys. So I just want to throw that out there too, is that when you look at data, you could say, oh, is this correlation, or is it causation, right? And I think that is one of the most overlooked things, especially when we all have OKRs and whatever. And, my thing is like, everything's a proxy metric, and it kind of has to be, because your real metric is, who's bought your product, or who's stayed in your community and who hasn't. And by the time you get that metric, it's too late to change it for those people, right? If somebody has churned, You can't really change it then. So, everything's a proxy metric. And when you look at something like, oh, how many posts do they make in the forums? Like, is that a good community member? Is that a community member you want to have? Or is this person like going around trolling everyone?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or are they like the most helpful person in the world and you want to give them a community award?
Right.
I love that, because what I'm hearing, and help me understand if I'm on the right track here, is that like data is necessary to contextualize. Like there is a context beyond the data itself that helps actually get to meaningful information, right? Like data on its own isn't the whole picture. And what that reminds me of in my, professional career in tech is professional services teams. Utilization is a huge metric we use based on, project-based data. And I would get hammered by, my leaders of, why is this person only this percent utilized and this percent utilized? Well, that's because that person is on 2 of the toughest accounts and they don't have as large of, whatever the context may be. But that's kind of what I'm hearing is like the data is, you can trust the data, but the data itself isn't the whole story. Is that kind of what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, I think a lot of people actually use the data as the end of the story when it should be the beginning of the story, especially when you're talking about, performance or efficiency. You get something like, oh, you look at your Atlas and look at your Jira. Did we meet 80% of what we planned to do in this sprint? No. Okay. Does that mean we're a terribly performing team? I don't know. Maybe it means a lot of bugs came up. And that to me is like the start of the investigation. Like, did we meet our quarterly goals? If we met our quarterly goals but never met our sprint goals, like, is that good? Is that bad? Let's have a conversation about that.
I love that. I think that language you just used it resonates so much, that data is often used as the end of the story, but it really is the beginning. And I think there's a lot of, at least in my experience, is tension when people are looking at the data, kind of bookended in 2 different ways, right? Like my leaders were like, well, the data says this, like end of story. And I'm like, well, actually, no, to your point, asking questions, getting curious, providing context is so critically important to follow, to figure out what the data is actually telling us versus just taking it as like.
I'm super popular because people are like, well, clearly the data says this. And I'm like, but does it? Is that what it's actually saying?
Exactly. Or, anyway, there's so many examples I can think of where data is really just the launching off point, but people are taking it as that end all be all. And it does create some challenges, if people don't think of it or understand it, I think in the way you're describing it. So anyway, I love that. That was great language. I'm going to steal that.
Yeah. And I think
if you're okay with it.
Good word too, Laura, of curiosity, right?
Yeah.
Like people need to get curious, and when they see anomalies or they see things that don't really meet expectations, they should be asking why. Why is this the way it is? And then they have to dig deeper into, maybe more qualitative research or more, going and digging into who actually is the one that's generating this data and figuring out why. Was there a system issue? Was there some holiday going on? Was that, like from a community perspective, we tend to see a lot of seasonal trends. So people tend to go away, especially in Europe over the summer. And then, end of year, we always see a slowdown. Well, if you're looking at it in the context of a very small window, instead of understanding the bigger picture, that could be really scary when you're like, oh, my month over month performance just tanked in December. Well, yeah.
It's December.
It did. And it's going to
and by the way,
too.
That doesn't mean you should have more events in August and December, right? You're going to be spending, unless you're like a holiday, whatever, right? You should, that doesn't also necessarily mean that like, oh, June's the most popular event, months for event. Let's have more things in June. Like, there's, and I think this can be applied to even, we were talking before about how people don't want a 70-page, onboarding form, right? But if you look and you see who are the people that are giving you the good data, and I put good in quotes because that's subjective and it depends on, which department you're in and what's good, like what motivated them to give that good information. Some people will just do it because they like filling out forms, and some people will just never fill out forms, right? But once you get there, is it because you have it in, 3 questions per page and you have 5 pages and most people do the first 2 pages? Is it because they were going to get a free, coffee mug if they filled out the form, right? Like, what is it that gets them to do that? And encourage those things, not to say like, okay, people aren't doing what I want, so let me try to incentivize them to do what I want, even though that's not what they want to do.
Well, I think without getting kind of curious and digging in a little bit more, you're operating based on a lot of assumptions, right? You're trying to create singular approaches based on assumptions without really a full understanding, right?
Yeah,
It's
you want to know my hottest of takes, and I'll
yes.
hopefully people will comment in the thing, because I'll probably get the tomatoes thrown at me. But dark mode, I have never seen data that shows that people engage more in dark mode. I have definitely seen, and I do not want to invalidate, I definitely know people, if you don't have dark mode, they get headaches, they won't go to the website. That's fine. Great. I totally understand that. Have dark mode available. I think it's very important from accessibility reasons. And, as with everything accessibility, it also helps people who don't necessarily, get migraines. Like maybe you're just surfing the website, in the dark, in bed, and your partner's next to you and you don't want to wake them up with a bright light, right? Like there's all sorts of reasons to have dark mode. But show me the data. Show me the thing that says, hey, when we gave people a dark mode option, 40% of our customers or users or whatever used it. And those people who used to engage 5 minutes a day now engage 20 minutes a day. Like, show me that. I'm sure it's there because so many people love it, right? And that would be a huge like justification of like, hey, if we do this the day after we turn it on, like look at these numbers from other sites, this is what happens.
That's really interesting because we're going to go down a whole nother rabbit hole. Okay. So accessibility wise, I really struggle with that requirement to have that justification in terms of volume or that change of behavior. And I understand that, we have limited resources. We have to prioritize on impact and whatnot, right? But I witnessed a really interesting conversation happen at an event I was at actually for SAP. And it was between somebody who owned a product and an end user. And the end user actually came up and said, I'm dyslexic. It would be really helpful for you to make these very specific changes in the platform so that it would be easier for me to use. And ultimately, accessibility helps everyone because it for the reasons you said. Like there's a wide variety of reasons why you might want to have a thing a certain way, but ultimately accessibility is better for everyone. And I watched this product owner say, yeah, but why would I just change it for you? Like I have
how does
a
a
million
product
other
owner
users
not
I have to think
understand
about.
that for every one person who's vocal, there's like 20 who have the same issue who aren't vocal and might have been not vocal by, just turning away at the door because they couldn't even sign up for the form.
Right. And I think my question would be, then we start to get into things like, how do you measure reduction in pain? Like maybe that person uses it the same amount, but it's more comfortable for them. And, maybe that changes their sentiment towards us as a brand. Well, how do we actually accurately measure things like sentiment? I know there are sentiment analysis tools out there, but can we really quantify in any sort of trust is not the right word, but like legitimate manner, how people feel about us?
Do we need, I mean, from a community perspective, how much do we need to justify how good people feel about us? And by the way, if I am not deaf, I know a few words of sign language that I've learned from my children who learned some sign language in school. I recently learned that my daughter does this to ask for a tissue, like the peace sign, I assume that, and that this is to go to the is that she has to go to the bathroom. So I don't know if that means I have something urgent. I don't know if that literally means I have to pee. And then me too. So that, cause she's 4. So, there's 20 kids in her class. And if somebody needs to go to the bathroom, the teacher doesn't want, 7 kids screaming at once. Right. So the sign language is very helpful there. Right. But when I see an interpreter for the deaf, I instantly like, okay, there's, and you could quantify, you could say, here's how much an interpreter costs, right? And you don't just get one, you need more than one because they have to take breaks and, it's a big deal, right? and how many people who are deaf are coming to it and how much they pay, right? You could literally do those numbers, and maybe it's cost effective and maybe it's not. But I will tell you that I will recommend a conference that does that has, noticeable accommodations over one that does not. And there are other people who would be like, what is this? I don't like it, right? And so sentiment is important, right? But people who have the sentiments, for example, they're listening to you and you're like, it's Columbus Day to me. I don't care about indigenous people. I'm like, why can't I just eat my turkey in peace without people talking about genocide? Why can't, who cares? There are some sentiments that, maybe should be weighed in a different light. Like there are things that, I guess what I'm trying to say is sentiment is important. And also you don't need to please everyone. Maybe there are people that you don't want in your community, and somebody who would be offended by seeing a sign language interpreter, maybe that's someone that you don't care if they're in your community or not, and that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's a valid approach, and it's definitely one that I think we talk about psychological safety a lot in community, and I think that is a really important component of that. What I think I'm trying to get to is, now I'm going to ask you to put on your product manager hat. So if I come to you and I say, hey, we should do this this accessibility change, and you're like, okay, but I have a roadmap that has all these other things and my backlog has all this and I only have X amount of capacity, how do you weigh the impact of something like dark mode versus other features that maybe you have more data to justify or something to that effect?
Yeah, and I mean, what if I even, let's say I have an accessibility team, even they have limited resources. So how do I know if I should do, dark mode first, or should I do something that helps dyslexic people, right, read easier, right? Which one should I do? Even if assuming that I'm going to do everything, I think part of it is impact. If I can, guess or assume, or if there are surveys, or when I do my discovery calls, right, I can ask people, who are like, hey, what are your main barriers to using this? Or, do you ever use it at night? Or, are you ever on a boat with this mobile app? So you might need a dark mode because it might be during the day, things like that. These are all questions I've had to ask.
I was going to say, I am going to ask about wild data at some point.
Yeah. So trying to assess the impact, and also how hard is it, right? Like dark mode or a font might be like, oh, who cares? It's just colors or whatever. But like with dark mode, it's like, well, does your logo look good in dark mode? Is it actually transparent? How does that work, right? They could be 17 different design teams getting together, right? Does the font, and are you changing the font in English? What about other languages? Right? And does it change any of like the length of menus? And does thing now spill over, and things that were supposed to fit on one line, does it now spill over to two lines because it's a little, easier to read and wider? So some of these things that might seem like they're easy might be easy, or they might be hard, right? And if it's something that's easy to do, then usually I'll, just do it. If it's something that'll take it and one engineer a day or two, right, then that's a no-brainer. Like even if it's impacting two people, right, it's easy enough. But and everything, of course, is not just like coding, but you have to test it and you have to look at it. And with design changes, you have to look at it in 20 different browsers, right? So it's not, it's not an easy thing. But it's important, and I think you also have to know who's your audience, right? Who's your buyers and who's your users. If something is going to give you a migraine, but it's a company mandated product, you're going to use it for as long as you need to use it. You might not love it, but you're going to use it. Whereas if it's like, an iPhone app that is, completely voluntary or something, or, a website that somebody's going to in their spare time, or, might be doing kind of both, like work related and thing, then that's also more important, right? So it's also how important is it to the company to have that value, right? Be, it's a value, right? Is it important to have to be able to cater to this audience, right? Which is really catering to everyone. And there are companies that, are like, well, we're English speaking only. Like, we don't want to do all the translation, or we can't do the translation. We can't afford it. Right. And that's, there's a lot of people who speak English, and there's a lot of people who don't. And those are choices. Right. And so companies choose to say, okay, we value multilingual, having a multilingual app and having audiences in different languages, or we don't. And those are hard decisions to make.
It's a huge question and a huge challenge for community, especially because it's not even just publishing in different languages, right? You have to be able to respond or moderate, user-generated content in those languages as well. And so I can definitely relate to that point. I think we're going to have you back on to talk just product management, because so many community managers find ourselves in that position of, oh, well, I'm here to deal with people, but also now I own this platform and I have to figure out what the heck agile software development lifecycle looks like and how to work with the development team, because we got to fix some stuff on the website, and so that's a whole different skill set that I think a lot of community managers are maybe not prepared to take on. I wanted to ask, what other practical skills do you think that community managers might need to be good data practitioners or good caretakers of their data?
A curious mind, or we say playing devil's advocate, like, why do you need this data? And this might not just be like you talking to someone else, you talking to yourself. Like, why do I, as a community leader, need someone's email address? Okay, well, I want to email them, replies to their posts. Good enough. Great. But maybe there should be an option to be like, nope, I'm just going to give you my username and I promise you I will log in. I don't want emails. I never check my emails. I got 50,000 emails I unread. Don't bother, the bits. Don't bother wasting the electricity sending me email, right? Do you need, again, their last name? This is not something anybody would doubt. Nobody would be like, yeah, of course, last name. Why wouldn't you? Right? But why? Do you really need their last name? Again, if you have an event and you want to put their full name on their badge, sure, then have their last name, right?
Reddit is a really interesting example of that. I mean, if you are participating in a very anonymous way, how much information do you really need? Maybe you need email address for password recovery or something to that effect. But beyond that, do you actually need names?
First names, yeah.
Yeah. That's an interesting thought. I have not fully wrapped my head around that, I think. I'll have to think about that one some more.
Yeah. And you can also give people options, right? Like, people say there's a lot of oh, gender, male, female, prefer not to say, but why? Here's an interesting thing. Disney Plus, or what do we have, a Disney Plus, membership. I have 2 kids. You said I had a kid. I have 2 kids. I have an almost 8-year-old and a 4-year-old. That's so it's fine.
I just knew about the one that you had while we worked together at Mongo.
Yes. And I had an older one at that point, but yes. So we
Disney Plus.
Yeah, Disney Plus. Thank you.
We all have mom brain. It's okay.
Yeah, we got you.
We made an account. We have an account, and we have the parents, and we're like, well, let's set up one for the kids. And I have a boy and a girl at this point. At least that's what they, that's what they prefer. And they were like, what's the gender? And I'm like, okay, well, you're Disney, so first of all, you could probably guess the gender based on 4 shows, the first 4 shows they watch. Why do you need this demographic information? You're just going to try to give me information that and you could get it yourself. This is Disney, right? I'm sure they literally have all of these pathways and AI to figure out if the first thing you watch is Lady and the Tramp and the second thing you watch is Cinderella, then you're a 47-year-old, mother of 7 in Burbank. There's just... It's Disney, right? They know everything. They have those kind of resources to do those kind of numbers. So it's just kind of why do I need to give you my my age? Okay, you want to see kids things or not kids things, totally understand, right? But maybe that should just be are you over 13 or are you under 13 or whatever, are you over 18? Are you under 18, right? Not the whole oh, are you 18 to 35 demographic?
It's really interesting. Yeah. I mean, minimizing PII in that way could make marketing data gathering a lot more ethical and a lot more, I could trust that it was actually anonymized a lot better if they were able to just take trends and say, okay, this person watches this, this, and this. So they are probably this thing, but we're not going to assign that to them as an individual record.
Or really, I mean, why do you assign them the demographics anyway? It's to recommend other things. So if you say, hey, people who liked this also like this, what does it matter? Like even what their gender is or what their location is, right? I mean, if it's banned in their location, great, don't show it to them. That's important. I actually was reading about, was it the WB or one of those other kind of networks that did some numbers and realized that their like demographics were like 35 to 60 and then changed all their programming because it was all like super, it was like the Flash and all this kind of like superhero stuff. And they changed it to like a more older audience. They lost all their like an older audience because that's what their demographics showed. And it was like, dude, why did you do that? Like you were successful.
You already attracted those people in that group.
Right. And now you're making assumptions. Like, do you think they were just watching the Flash because they're like, I really like the WB, but like I don't like the superhero thing, but I'm just gonna watch it because I don't know.
It's like, all that's on.
Why would you change that? And they lost a lot of customers doing that because they made the assumption that, you know, superhero movies are for the 18 to 35 demographic, and you know, we never get older.
I mean, we talk a lot about benchmarking and things like that, and it makes you question, you know, what should the expectation be versus how much should your current data coming in actually inform your expectations instead of comparing against what you assume would be normal in a given trend. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me again of what Sheeri said about data is the beginning of the story, not the end. In the example you just gave, it seems like they saw the data as the end. They made a lot of assumptions. They changed a lot of things and ended up being wrong instead of asking questions or being curious or, you know, digging in a little bit.
Right. Or even thinking like, hey, what does this mean? We assumed that the people who watched our shows were 18 to 35, but actually most of the people aren't. Maybe we need to change that assumption.
Right. Instead of changing the content.
Right. Yeah. Or, you know, change the content a little bit. Put something, you know, different in your prime time slot and then see what happens. You know what I mean? Not just like they literally like changed a whole bunch of stuff. So, yeah.
Sheeri, this has been amazing. I have so many other things I want to dig into with you, but I want to make sure we're closing out on time. And I would love to have you back again because I want to talk about WildAid and open source projects. And I want to talk about product management and you know, community managers on product management. So I would love for us to do this again. Thank you to everyone who is watching. Thank you to my co-host, Laura. And a couple of really quick announcements. One, Community Rebellion Live event is happening tomorrow, which I will be participating in on a roundtable conversation with all of the other speakers who attended the conference in person in Prague earlier this year. And there will be 4 new speakers who were not in Prague who will be presenting during that event as well. So I'll drop a link to that in the show notes. And I'm planning on hosting an actual live virtual goal setting workshop. So speaking of all of the data we've been talking about today, I will be sharing more information about that in my newsletter. So go to communityunlocked.com, subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to the newsletter, and I promise not to collect any extra data. How about that? Your data will only be used for the purposes of sending you these emails. So anyway, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Sheeri. Appreciate you and hope you all have an amazing week.
Likewise. Thank you, Sheeri. Thanks, Jamie.
Thank you, guys. It was great.